Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's event. We are going to get right into it. Thank you very much for making time for this particular important meeting out of your weekend. If you want to chat and introduce yourselves, where you're joining us from, if you're part of an organization or city or country you're joining us from, so we can make it interactive, that would be excellent. But at this moment, I'm going to go ahead and get started. The meeting is a community meeting on Nigeria's redesignation by the United States as a country of particular concern. And today we are been able to put together an amazing panel to help us consider perspective in support and in opposition of this designation. Before we do that, I want to talk briefly about the work that we do here at the Nigerian Center. And to do that, I have a very short video that would tell us all about Nigerian Center. But before that, you would be hearing from our amazing panelists and speakers. First, from Nkechi Ilechi, our Nigerian Center Policy Director, on how to engage your elected representative on this particular proposed legislation. You will be hearing from Emmanuel Ogebe, international Nigerian American human rights attorney from the U.S. Nigeria Law Group. Madam Ndidi Okonkwo Nwuneli of the One Campaign, Maduka Nkuku Prince, Mr. From NAPAC, the Nigerian American Public Affairs Committee, and Dr. Malcolm Fabiyi, who is also a board member of the Nigerian Center, but in this presentation, speaking on the platform of GAIN, Governance Advancement Initiative for Nigeria. The speakers will be coming shortly. There will be time for Q&A. We ask that you hold off your questions to when we get to Q&A to give our speaker time to do the presentation. We have a very short time for this meeting. And about the Nigerian Center, here is our introduction video.
My name is Benga Agunjimin, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Nigerian Center. The Nigerian Center is the very first Nigerian American immigrant and community center. While we are called the Nigerian Center, we serve all minority and all immigrant groups in the United States. In many immigrant communities across the country and around the world, whether they're Chinese or Jewish or Latinos or even Ethiopians, there is an actual location members of those communities can walk into to support the American dream and American experience. While the Nigerian community individually has prospered, we now have an opportunity as a community to have our own Nigerian Center.
I am most excited to be a part of the Nigerian Center because we are a resource hub. And we know that while a lot of Nigerians we may know come into the country and they have a connection here or there is a huge population that don't have access. I can speak to thinking about maybe 30, 40 years ago when my parents came to the country. And while my dad came to the country through education, my mom came through a lottery. And when she got here, she had to go do things the regular way. You know, she came in New York, hustled, worked at McDonald's for like 2 weeks. And from McDonald's, she started getting, you know, other menial jobs before she was able to meet my dad. They got married, they had children. My mom didn't go back to school until she was like 40 to finally start her career. And I know that if there was something like the Nigerian Center, she could have been afforded opportunities, access information on how to go to school or how to start her own business if that's what she wanted to venture into.
I remember my uncle, I think I was like 10. He got deported. I haven't seen him in years because he can't come back in this country. If he had had the resources that the Nigerian Center offered, maybe it would be a different story.
As a pastor, and I can speak confidently for the church community, a lot of pastors struggle with the kinds of immigration challenges that their members are having. And sometimes when we pastors meet, we joke about the fact that there's this thing that is, the don't ask, don't tell kind of thing. A principle that most Nigerians are engaging in. They don't tell you what they are going through. Some of them are dying in silence. By the time they speak up, sometimes it's too late. And I know that as a pastor, I could have, the Nigerian Center will have come handy in helping people to know what is right, having the right information, speak to the right attorney, have right representation in court, and just to make the journey easier and smoother in the United States.
People come here from different paths, and for the same main reason is to get a better life, a better situation for their family. So there are numerous ways, there are numerous paths to the United States and to citizenship. So we help people with family-based immigration, employment-based immigration, asylum, refugee cases, student visas, pretty much everything that the law allows us to assist people with the process of immigration.
Just having this center here, it's just people identified that looks just like us, where we can get the resource from. I mean, this is something that even me as a grown-up young person just wanted to come. I wanted to know that it belongs here. I'm just happy that this is here. I wish that my mom and dad, they were still alive to witness this experience.
From the time my parents came from Kenya, they immigrated to New Jersey, and that's where they actually met. It took years for my mom to find employment. My dad has stayed at the same job for 25 plus years in fear of not being able to find other employment. Not even that, being able to purchase a home, it took them 25 years to buy their dream home. Having the healthcare aspect and having health insurance for my siblings and I. Nigerian Center is providing a service from all crosses across the board for immigrants.
And Nigerian Center provides opportunities with immigration and naturalization, provide home ownership opportunities, access to capital, language classes, and cultural programs.
Learning about the Nigerian Center was a godsend. Growing up, I used to think about how we can share our experiences and our culture. And oftentimes, Nigerian people are so interested in giving back, but there are few opportunities and motives to do so. So when I heard about the Nigerian Center, it just clicked. We're talking about home ownership, we're talking about financial literacy, we're talking about immigration services, not only for people from our background diaspora, but for everybody else as well can gain from it. I see the Nigerian Center not only as an opportunity to celebrate our culture, but to also share it as well.
I welcome you to be a part of the journey and to be a part of the experience. Welcome to the Nigerian Center.
Okay, quickly, I want to highlight a few upcoming programs. The tax season, we are a community-free tax preparation and filing center called VITA. We take both in-person and virtual appointments for your taxes. It was said during our most recent Know Your Right workshop, as far as immigration is concerned in the United States, filing your taxes is considered being in good moral character. And it does have immigration and naturalization implication. There is no excuse to hold back taxes, at least filing them. Please come to the Nigerian Center so we can help you with that. Our next Know Your Rights is on the topic of asylum, credible fear, and domestic violence. For those who may have pending or prospective asylum application and trying to figure out what options do they have, please, you want to join this particular Know Your Rights. If you go to our website, you'll be able to register. It's a virtual event. You can join from anywhere. We put out a press release today. We signed a partnership with an amazing organization called Upwardly Global that helps immigrants to actually transition their professional overseas experience in the United States without having to do it all over again. And we will be hosting an informational session on May 28th, and that would also include immigration presentation on work-based, employment-based immigration options. That is available on our website on the events. Our walk-in immigration is still open. You can come into the center on Thursdays or any time of the week. You can submit a virtual appointment intake form, and for a small fee, you can have access to an attorney. Please go to Nigerian Center website /immigration for immigration and legal aid program. A few opportunities to get involved in what we do. Volunteer opportunities exist at the Nigerian Center, community partners to immigrant serving organization, and those who want to amplify immigrants' rights and social inclusion, financial inclusion opportunities. If you're not connected with us on social media, please do so today at the following options on the screen. If you're not yet a donor to the Nigerian Center, we highly invite you to consider making a donation to the Nigerian Center, where 501c3 donations are tax deductible. And if you're connected to organizations that would be a good supporter to the Nigerian Center, please consider yourself an ambassador to help us get the word out so we can continue to do the important work that we do. That at this moment, we're going to turn it to our wonderful presenters. But before then, Nkechi, would you please come and I'll stop sharing and you can do your presentation at this point. Over to you, Nkechi.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to share my screen and give everyone a presentation on the House Resolution 220 and how to engage our congressional representatives on this matter. Thank you so much for joining. One thing that the Nigerian Center is very passionate about is keeping our community very well informed on immigration policies and anything pertaining to Nigeria. So I'm going to do a very brief presentation. Could everyone see the presentation?
We could see it, but now that yes, we can.
Okay, so it looks like it's getting a little choppy. I'm going to turn off my camera. So that I can keep going. Okay. Okay. HRES, this is House Resolution 220's presentation. So what exactly is the House Resolution 220? House Resolution 220 is a country of particular concern designation usually by the U.S. Department of State under the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998. And it identifies countries where governments engage in or tolerate in systemic, ongoing, or egregious violations of religious freedom. So Nigeria actually was designated a country of particular concern back in 2020 due to severe and ongoing violations of religious freedom, and was removed in November 2021 by the State Department. So House Resolution 220 actually was reintroduced into the 119th Congress on March 11, 2025 by Representative Christopher Smith. And this resolution expresses that the sense of Congress that Nigeria should be designated as a country of particular concern by the Secretary of State due to the involvement or tolerance of severe religious freedom violations. As of now, it has been introduced, and the resolution was referred to the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, which is why we're having this meeting. I want to talk about what the country of particular concern designation actually can mean for Nigeria and why it's important for us to not only learn about this designation, but get involved with contacting our congressional members. So the first thing is economic sanctions. If Nigeria is designated as a country under particular concern, that means that we can potentially have economic sanctions, which can ban the US from assisting Nigeria economically or in security-related aids. We can get export restrictions, suspensions of trade agreements. We can get asset freezes or visa bans on individuals or officials responsible for abuses, and sanctions on government agencies complicit in violations. And this could definitely put a damper on diplomatic relations between the US and Nigeria, and it can even delay or cancel high-level meetings or visits. And so I briefly want to go over how to get involved in whether you are for or against this designation. So whether you are a US citizen or not, or resident or non-resident of a state, you can contact the local representatives. I had an opportunity to work in Congress, and I can tell you that when you contact your congressional office, the more you contact your congressional offices on a particular topic, the staff are actually tallying how many calls they receive on a particular topic. So if we don't reach out to our representatives, whether we are for this or against it, then that means that there are a group of people making a decision about our own country. So it's very important, as I go over this portion, to take note on how to contact your representative and share your voice on this designation. So you can contact the bill sponsors and copy your representative on the email. As I mentioned, Representative Christopher Smith is actually the one that introduced this bill into the House. So you can go to www.housegov/representatives. I'm going to actually see if I can click it. And we will possibly send this information via email to everybody that's in attendance so you can have it. And this is also being recorded, so you can go back and take a look on how exactly to reach out to your representatives, even for future immigration issues or policy programs that you want to discuss with your representatives. So you go to www.house.gov/representatives/find your representative, and you can push in your zip code. And I'm just going to put in my zip code. And it will pull up who my representative is. And as you can see, my representative for the 3rd Congressional District of Maryland is Sarah L. Firth. She's a Democrat, and it will give you information on whether you want to send her an email, or typically you can, contact them through their website. It says email me. You can email them. And typically we'll ask you to further confirm your exact address and make sure that this is your representative's office. But this is another way that you can contact your congressional member to express your concerns. And you can also call by phone. Once you go through that website and you get your congressional members' contact information, their phone number for all of their offices are on the bottom of their websites. And you can state this, this is just an example of how you can reach out to your congressional offices. I'm calling to write or express my support or opposition of House Res 220, expressing the sense of Congress regarding the need to designate Nigeria as a country of particular concern for engaging in or tolerating systemic, ongoing, or egregious violations of religious freedom and for other purposes. And you can even personalize this statement. I believe in the fundamental right for freedom of religion, and I'm concerned about human rights violations globally, and you can personalize it. Or you can read the call of action. I respectfully urge senators/representatives, whoever your representative is, to support or oppose House Res 220. By co-sponsoring the resolution. Or you can advocate for or oppose the swift passage of this resolution to address the grave concerns regarding religious freedom violations in Nigeria. And also, this is how we keep engaging. And once we start doing this, and once our representatives start hearing from us, they start to know that there is a strong backing behind the Nigerian community. And they will start to consider and reach out to us for our input on certain things that are being discussed about our country. When we first attended the first hearing during the 118th Congress concerning this resolution, out of the entire room, I think it was only the Nigerian Center that were Nigerians outside of one of the panelists that were actually Nigerians in the room. So we are really passionate about hearing information concerning our country, and we bring it back to our community, but we all have to do our part by please reaching out to your congressional representatives and lending your voice and letting them hear your voice so that they can meet the needs of our community. Thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Nkechi, for that presentation. At this moment, I want to bring on our very first panelist and speaker, Attorney Emmanuel Ogebe, who has really dedicated his life to this particular matter. Time wouldn't even do justice to introduce him properly, but I would say there is Nigeria and human rights, and there is Attorney. Where is this Mohammed? And there is Attorney Emmanuel Ogebe. He's actually one of the architects of this particular resolution on the back end, and is a thought leader working with the United States government and the U.S. relations on human rights in Nigeria. I will turn it over to you, sir, Mr. Emmanuel, not Mohammed.
Well, thank you very much, Benga, and I do want to appreciate everything that you've done for us as a community. As one of those who came out here on exile unexpectedly over a quarter of a century ago, I wish there was a Nigeria Center, back then. I also wish there was one, 12 years ago when the Boko Haram crisis was at its peak, and, we had to respond. Well, I will be very brief in my remarks because the danger of being a subject matter expert is that there's so much to say that there's never enough time to say it. So I will confine my remarks to a few historical contexts and then hopefully address more specific issues during the questions and answers. But let me start by saying, what is the framework of U.S.-Nigeria policy engagement over the years? And I probably should start with my own experience. As I mentioned, I came out here on exile during the pro-democracy movement under the dictatorship of General Abacha. And we needed to go to Congress, we needed to go and advocate for global intervention in Nigeria's situation. And one of the earliest campaigns we ran was in the city of New York. We worked with the city of New York to designate the street in front of the Nigerian consulate and permanent mission to the UN after Kudirat Abiola, a pro-democracy activist who was murdered by the Abacha regime. So that's one of the earliest advocacy efforts that we undertook. Until this day, that street is named after Kudirat Abiola. And so if you're ever in New York and you see that, it was a product of advocacy of Nigerian activists. And in that era, most of us were here on exile, and most of us, all of us, essentially were on the side of democracy against the military dictatorship. So it wasn't a controversial issue, even though the administration would pay Nigerians and others to counter us. Now we have democracy in Nigeria, but there continue to be issues. I've worked on several of those issues over the past. The bill that Elechi referred to, I actually worked on that bill for the passage of that bill, the International Religious Freedom Act. And what has happened is, under that act, each year the United States is to review countries' violations of religious freedoms and recommend designations and sanctions as necessary. So it's an annual effort that is done by the State Department. Now, let me quickly jump to another issue, which was the designation of Boko Haram as a foreign terrorist organization. This was also an effort that I led. And what was instructive was that the United States government did not want to designate Boko Haram as a foreign terrorist organization. Makes no sense, right? You know, it's foreign, it's terrorist, it's an organization, it's a no-brainer. But for whatever political considerations, they did not want to do it. So I led the advocacy effort to get them to designate with this same congressional subcommittee chaired by Chris Smith. Here's what's interesting. The US State Department was so opposed to it that they asked Ambassador John Campbell to organize resistance. So John Campbell got 20 American professors to write to the State Department opposing the designation of Boko Haram as a foreign terrorist organization. Now, here's what's the shocker. Out of those 20 professors, there was no Nigerian. Now, you and I both know that if you go to, Howard University today, you're very likely to find 20 Nigerian professors in that campus. There was no single Nigerian professor in this team of Nigerian experts. And what's the moral of that story is if you don't define your own story, someone else will define it for you. As Ogebe has famously said in his writings, until the lion tells its own tale, the story that will be told will be that of the glorious hunter. And this is why this event is very important for Nigerians to be voices in their own destiny. And so we led an uphill task, and to God's glory, we were able to successfully get Boko Haram designated as a foreign terrorist organization despite the opposition of the Ambassador Campbell and the American academics. Now, let me quickly say this. We got that designation done in November 2013. And by April 2014, Boko Haram abducted almost 300 Chibok girls, and the whole world heard about what happened in Nigeria, what was going on in Nigeria. Now, here's something I should point out. This is important to our community. I remember I worked on an asylum case for a Nigerian lady who did not want to be returned to Nigeria after her studies. And the court was not convinced that, she was eligible for asylum, and adjourned the case for a year. When we came back a year later for the trial, the judge said she wouldn't take any additional evidence, and she granted the girls asylum on the spot. What had changed? The Bring Back Our Girls advocacy had escalated the situation in Nigeria to the awareness of the average American, so much so that that court took judicial notice of what was going into Nigeria and granted that application. And so that was a sea change because of that advocacy. Now, let me fast forward to a couple of things that we've achieved since. We've also succeeded in getting the International Criminal Court to recognize that there are crimes against humanity going on in Nigeria. We were also able to, in 2020, get the United States for the first time, after almost 20 years of recommendations, to get the United States to recognize or to designate Nigeria as a country of particular concern. Unfortunately, what has happened is that when that administration left, the new administration came in and took Nigeria completely out of consideration. So it wasn't that Nigeria improved. It just that they threw away the game book or the rule book. And that was very deceptive, and that was very dishonest. Now, let me maybe emphasize why it is important that we should have international engagement on human rights issues in Nigeria. Nigeria tends to be a lawless country. I don't know if you know this, but just yesterday, the same committee chaired by Chris Smith issued a statement condemning the threats made to a bishop who testified last month about the killings in Nigeria. He talked about the priests, his priests who were killed, his parishes destroyed, those kidnapped. And when he went back to Nigeria, he was threatened. And in the statement issued by Smith yesterday, he mentioned the fact that I myself was persecuted by the Nigerian government for testifying about the situation in Nigeria. The Nigerian ambassador here tried to have my passport revoked. These are the kinds of authoritarian and unconstitutional actions that our governments take against our own citizens. Now, we were the ones who fought for democracy, and it's hard to believe that now under a democracy, we're still facing the same kinds of repressive actions from our governments as during the days of dictatorship. So I will want to wrap up my remarks by giving you a few examples of the extreme religious persecution that's going on in Nigeria that warrants Nigeria's being designated again. And I'll give two quick examples. The first one was, a few weeks ago, I was in Nigeria, in Kano, to mediate between the Ministry of Women's Affairs and a Christian orphanage in Kano. What had happened was on Christmas Day in 2019, government officials arrived at the orphanage, not to give them, gifts from Santa for the kids, but to arrest the Christian missionaries who were running the orphanage and to pack the children away to a state-run orphanage. Their names were changed to Muslim names, and the children were converted to Islam. Most of them were. The adults resisted, or the older ones resisted. When we met with Kano State government about a month ago, we said to them, look, these kids came in speaking English. Now they can only communicate in Hausa. One of them was born to 80% of his body, and so on and so forth. Why don't you release them back to these missionaries who can provide the best care for them? And so we left, and a week later, we were told that the government was ready to release the children and we should come back. And we said, no, we just left Nigeria. We're not coming back until we have something in writing. They shared with us a court order and a signed settlement agreement between Women's Affairs and the missionaries, saying the children will be released on May 19th. Based on that, we got on a plane and flew back to Nigeria for the release of the children. We got there, and guess what? The commissioner said, you know what? I've changed my mind. I'm never going to release these kids, and you guys can go to hell. We were almost lynched at the orphanage that day when we were there for a court order transfer of these children. Now, fast forward to the day before yesterday, I just got the documents. The government has gone back to the court to ask that they set aside the consent agreement that they reached to release those kids, claiming that after we left, the children converted to Islam. What I'm describing to you now is what a state government has just done to children from a Christian orphanage. We're not talking about Boko Haram that goes in and abducts people's children and turns them to sex slaves. We're talking about the state government. If this isn't egregious persecution, I really don't know what is. The one other quick example I will give is the case of Sunday Jackson. Sunday Jackson, was a student. He was on his farm when he was attacked by a herdsman, 10 years ago. And after 6 years in prison, Sunday Jackson was sentenced to death because he defended himself and the headsman died. Now, in the last 2 weeks in Nigeria, almost 100 people have been killed in Benue and Plateau states, where my parents come from, and also in southern Nigeria by, Fulani headsmen who are a jihadi tribe that have, been in Nigeria for, since the jihad in the 1800s. And no one has been arrested and prosecuted for these atrocities. So in the one case when one individual was able to defend himself, the Nigerian state last month at the Supreme Court confirmed his death sentence. So this shows you the disparity between us as Nigerian citizens in that country. Some people are sacred cows and some people are unequal citizens. So right now, as we speak, we're in the effort of trying to gain clemency for Sunday Jackson because the system completely failed him. It failed to protect him, and when he protected himself, it decided he did not have the right to self-defense. And that no citizen should be comfortable with that sort of scenario. So I've given you a few broad strokes about, the situation in Nigeria. There's so many more. The last one I'll mention, some of you may have heard, there's a young lady in Sokoto State who complained about the insecurity in the country. And her reward was that she was arrested and charged before a Sharia court for, using insulting language. And she's currently in prison. So we have to recognize that these are not acceptable standards for this modern day and age, and we need to change that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Attorney Ogebe, for the wonderful presentation. Please stay back with us for Q&A when that time opens. At this moment, I want to introduce Madam, I don't know if she be me calling her Madam, but Ndidi Okonkwo, Nwuneli. She want to speak. I don't want to preempt our position, so I just want to turn it over to Ndidi. The floor is yours, ma'am.
All right, good evening, everyone, and great to be here. I found it really interesting, the last presentation, so I just want to commend the speaker. Clearly, I'm new to advocacy, and this is an interesting path, but I would like to say just a bit about what we do at the One Campaign, and then why this is near and dear to my heart. So the One Campaign is a global advocacy organization. It was started by Bono, Bobby Shriver, and Jamie Drummond over 20 years ago. And we fight for the investments to ensure healthy lives and economic opportunity in Africa. And we definitely do advocacy in all our G7 countries. And we have offices in Paris, in Berlin, in London, Brussels, the US, in DC, where our headquarters is, and then also in Canada. And then on the continent, we have a presence in Abuja, in Johannesburg, and in Senegal. And I'm coming to this from a perspective that I've been in DC for a year as the first African CEO of the One Campaign. And I've been quite alarmed about the level of advocacy from different African countries relative to counterparts. And I'll use the example of Ukraine. When we compare Ukraine's lobby and advocacy with South Sudan, for example, you can see there's a huge disparity. And, Ukraine was able to get about $100 billion from the US government. Sudan has gotten about $1 billion. And as we think about the reason why there are disparities, we understand, the lack of awareness about the continents, the biases, but also the fact that we don't have a very strong diaspora lobby. And so I'm really excited by this conversation, and I commend the team behind the Nigeria Center, the vision behind it, and the desire to amplify our voice. I would like to say that in response to this direct issue, and then also the other issues that are pending, there are a few challenges that we have to address. And when we think about our advocacy actually has to start from Nigeria itself and the role of the diaspora. So in all my G7 countries, we haven't had an ambassador since this Nigerian administration came in. And it means that we're almost invisible in many, many parts of the debate for Africa, the conversations about Africa, and the opportunities for Africa. So the first question and request I'd like to put on the table is, what can we collectively do to fast track the need for an ambassador in DC, a full, substantive, qualified, capable ambassador to represent Nigerian interests, and then in all our G7 countries? because it is affecting us. And every single event I go to, I meet ambassadors from other African countries, some more effective than others. But what are we doing there? We are also trying to build the capacity of ambassadors to understand their role as advocates for their countries and as advocates and bridge builders to the diaspora. And we're currently exploring a partnership with Georgetown to actually create an ambassadors program where you really equip them with the skills and tools to be effective advocates. Because we realize that, in this context, some are very comfortable providing logistics support to the visitors who come from their home countries or consular services, but they don't realize how important their voice is. The second is how we use data and information to show up our voice and our position. And I'll say this to Wenga and others, that, when I joined and we were going into an election year, I was making an argument that, we as Nigerians contribute taxes to this country. Those who are US citizens or green card holders are playing pivotal roles in key industries. I often say that if a Nigerian stopped working, the health system in many cities across the US would shut down. And I think some diaspora groups are doing a better job than others in actually quantifying our contributions to sectors, our contributions to tax revenue, our contributions to cities, and our growing influence at the mayoral level, at the state level, and at the federal level. And at one, we actually have indirectly engaged with some Nigerian mayors in some small towns across the U.S., some state congressmen, some district congressmen, and some senators. And it's just exciting to see that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when I first came to the US to go to college, and now we have a diaspora population that's entering politics, first and second and third generation, and how we're leveraging them to influence policies, not just at the federal level, but at the state level and the Congress level. And I would really like to challenge us to say, how are we doing that before it comes to DC decisions are made? And at the One campaign, we've built out an activist network, a faith leaders network. We've mapped out all the senators and congressmen and where their pastors are. And they play a critical role in fighting for life-saving medicines, for Gavi and Global Fund replenishments, for IDA, which is the World Bank concessional financing, but for Africa to be visible, and Africa to get resources. We've campaigned for MCC and DFC and AGOA and many other opportunities to unlock financing. And I would love to see how we're building out those networks so that it doesn't come to a head when we have an issue, like in this case with human rights. And then the third thing I would like to really put on the table is the importance of the return on investment for engaging with Africa. We've seen that in this current administration, we have to demonstrate that return on investment. And this goes beyond human rights. It also goes to job creation, wealth creation, investment opportunities, mutually beneficial opportunities, respect, the tariff discussion that is raging, et cetera, et cetera. And that's really, really critical. Now, on the specific topic at hand, I would say that what I have heard, and it's quite alarming to me, is that we haven't, as a country and as a diaspora, put a comprehensive position together and also demonstrated who will speak on our behalf and designated that. And we haven't really looked at the short-term, medium-term, and long-term consequences for the decisions that are put forward. And for me, I think there's really an opportunity here to really say, yes, there are different people from different sides of the divide, but what is in the best interest for Nigeria right now? And yes, there's religious intolerance, and we have to address it globally. The reason why people are coming to the US to help and to intervene is that there must be a reason why we're not engaging at that level. So I would offer up that with the One campaign, we do have a faith leaders network. We do have a Muslim faith leader in that group from Nigeria. We have a Christian faith, multiple Christian faith leaders. And it would be worthwhile if the Nigeria Center is interested to actually see if we can engage with those faith leaders and understand how we can have a unified position from our country and then elevate it to the highest levels. Because the implications for us as Nigerians, if we don't take this on holistically with one voice, is that the future gets shaped for us. And my final point is that as we look to Africa Day, the One campaign is going to be leading quite a few initiatives to showcase Africa and the Senate, Rotundo, in the House, bringing the discussion on return on investment, bringing faith leaders. So I encourage you to please follow us at one.org, join our mailing list. We had quite a few young Nigerians come from all over America, fully funded by One for a Hill Day. So they did go on the Hill to speak to congressmen and to really get involved. And we can be doing a lot more together. Thanks so much, everyone. I look forward to working with you all and taking future discussions and questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Ndidi. At this moment, I'm going to turn it to Prince Maduka Nkuku, who is the president of the Nigerian American Public Affairs Committee. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Benga, for that introduction. I want to also appreciate the speakers who have spoken so very well. Like Benga said, my name is Maduka Nkuku. I am the president of the Nigerian American Public Affairs Committee, NAPAC USA. NAPAC USA was formed in 2011 as a 501c4 entity. Our objective has been to inform, engage, and empower Nigerian Americans in the United States. And we do these things through various advocacy initiatives, such as we are in here this evening. We also have as implementation partners 527s that we use in participating in elective positions. And as of today, NAPAC has successfully put no less than 23 people across the United States into various levels of elective positions, and we continue to grow. And we hope that more people will join us in that effort. Just like the last speaker said, we do need to be in those spaces as well. As much as we advocate for policy matters in general, we do need to be in elective positions where the decisions are made at various levels of government administration. So today, what we see ourselves involved in today is one of those advocacy situations where, like most people who have spoken have said, you have Nigerians on both sides of this issue. This designation issue, first of all, we agree, NAPAC as an organization, I as an individual, we agree that the killings are simply unacceptable. And as egregious as they may seem, we don't think that the idea that it's just religious killings is accurate. We do know that there are other factors that are involved in these killings. Some of them are, tribal, ethnic, some say economic reasons. Some of these unrest in those areas where we have these events are sometimes caused by economic situations. The argument for not designating Nigeria as a country of particular concern stems from the fact that some people believe that the last time this happened, there was no credible proof that the benefit of that designation was helpful. So for those people who do not believe that the designation will bring about the desired result, they propose some alternatives. And those alternatives will range from targeted actions against known perpetrators or people in government who themselves are standing in the way of prosecuting those individuals who are caught doing these things. NAPAC, for example, our objective is more for Nigerians that live in the United States. And so you would ask yourself, why are we in this? Why are we concerned about this designation? Well, the problem with that designation for us here in America is that once a country is so designated, the stigma that it carries with it could affect those of us that live here, affect our children. When the law enforcement gets, when our children get in contact with the law enforcement, some misinterpretation of that designation could be at play. So to that extent, we are concerned that that designation starting from us here in America has potential effects that we may not be able to contemplate or anticipate at this level. And then we move out of the United States and say, well, what about people in Nigeria? We know that if this designation carries sanctions along with it, economic sanctions, it will have an effect on the very people that it was designed to help. So our argument for those people who argue against that designation is not that we do not recognize the fact that not enough is being done as far as we are concerned back in Nigeria to stem these killings or to address these killings. We recognize that. I think the argument is that we should find alternative sanctions or actions that we can take collectively, persuade the United States government to take, that could specifically target the individuals who are in a position to do things to stop these crimes from happening, these killings from happening. So we therefore present options for the Nigerians here that they would need to use to reach out to their respective elected officials and state their case. Just like I think it was Ms. Nkechi that spoke earlier and said, look, we're not saying everyone is in one bucket, but for whatever position you take, do act on it. Do not just sit down there and hope that your desires, your wishes, your preference will prevail. You have to take action. Ms. Ndidi spoke to the fact that Nigerians, we need to step up our game and speak for ourselves. And this is where NAPAC comes into play. We have reached out in the case of Mr. Sunday Jackson. We have also lent our voice to the plea for clemency in that matter. We have participated with the congressman's office right after the hearings. We made a case for an opportunity to meet with a broader spectrum of Nigerian community to present another perspective to what they are used to. And one of the experiences we had on that day was that they asked us the question that when this came up during the first Trump administration, were you guys involved in this advocacy issue, the way you're going about it now? The answer was that we are doing more now than we did then. That shows growth. And that shows that we are beginning to come into our own, we're beginning to take responsibility for our welfare in this country. And it is about time that we can collaborate with people like Ndidi said. NAPAC is obviously a good organization to partner with to do the kinds of things that you have described that your organization does. We believe that the current situation in this country, different as it is, it's a good reason for us to come together. I see it as an opportunity that is going to make Nigerians who have been complacent to realize that we do need to coalesce and tell our own story. Another thing that Ms. Ndidi said that is very poignant is that the faith-based organizations are very, very important in what we have to do, what we need to do. We had a meeting with one of these organizations a couple of weeks ago. They told us that they recognize that our community is very complacent when it comes to their civic responsibility. And, with that recognition, means that we are about to find a solution, because once you acknowledge, agree, understand that you have a problem, then the solution will come about. So this is a time to push. We are organizing different activities in response to the challenges that this current administration presents to the diaspora community, especially in the immigration space. And that is why in this matter that we're talking about today, our position is such that it requires the participation of our community, not just as an organization, but individuals to speak to their Congress people and let them know their views. It is our hope that the action that will be taken, it's our hope that action that will be taken will be more productive than blanket sanctions, because blanket sanctions, like we have observed, have their limitations. We believe that if we are able to persuade our Congress people that we will get some action that is going to be more productive, more meaningful, and speak to the solutions that's going to be long-lasting as far as these killings go, because the reasons are far more than religious. There's a preponderance of it is, of course, it seems that way, but we do know and agree that the reasons for these killings, a lot of it also rests on the economy. And some of the sanctions should speak to the things that are causing the economic climate that gives rise to these types of unrest that eventually cause killings to occur. We vehemently condemn the killings. We acknowledge the severity of the killings. We in no way try to minimize the reality of the situation, but we do believe that designating Nigeria as a country of particular concern will not solve the problem the way it is intended to. And I'm glad that Ms. Nkechi has provided a means through which we can all collectively in our respective places of residence, states, wherever we may be in this country, reach out and communicate our intention, our desires, our preferences, and hopefully the majority of the views will prevail on the authorities that are working on this to do the right thing. Either way, NAPAC is here to continue to advocate for the interests of Nigerians here in the United States. When it gets to this point where we have to speak for the people in Nigeria, we will also do so because we do have interest in that place as well. So I use this opportunity to extend our desire to cooperate to partner with the one organization of Ms. Ndidi Nwuneli. I'm going to reach out to her and share our resources and see what we can do together to advance our interest as a people. With that, I'm going to pass the mic on back to Mr. Gujimi, and so we can make some room for Q&A. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for that presentation. At this moment, I want to bring on to the platform Dr. Malcolm Fabiyi, who is the president of GAIN, Governance Advancement for the Initiative in Nigeria. He's also a board member of the Nigerian Center. And I should mention, during the last time we had this community meeting, it was about 1 to 1 million people against this individual sharing an alternate perspective. And I'm so glad that he's accepted our invitation to come back and also speak to this matter. So over to you, sir, Dr. Malcolm.
Thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Malcolm Fabiyi. I'm grateful for this opportunity to contribute to this very important community conversation. And I'll be speaking to you today wearing a number of hats. First is I come to you as president of GAIN, as Gbenga indicated. GAIN stands for Governance Advancement Initiative for Nigeria. It's an organization that's dedicated to promoting accountability and enhancing the quality of governance in Nigeria through research, analysis, policy, advocacy, and activism. Secondly, I'm speaking as a member of the board of the Nigerian Center, an organization that is dedicated to promoting the interest of Nigerian immigrants in the United States. Thirdly, I speak to you as a Northern Christian from Kogi State in the Nigerian Middle Belt. And finally, I also speak to you as a pro-democracy activist for the past 3 decades. I'm a former president of the University of Lagos Students Union. I was Students Union president during the June 12 crisis and the aftermath of that. And as someone who has personally experienced arrest, torture, and detention by the Nigerian state in the mid-1990s, prior to the current democratic dispensation that began in 1999. I also want to thank Attorney Ogebe for his advocacy, as well as Congressman Smith for the work that he and the co-sponsors of the CPC resolution bill are doing in helping to give voice to all of Nigeria's ethnic and religious groups. I'm sure all of you will agree that in a nation with 250 ethnic nationalities, 2 major Abrahamic religions, Christianity and Islam, and hundreds of traditional belief systems, it is easy for some voices not to be heard. I also want to make it clear that I salute the spirit of the resolution. I believe it is grounded in a concern for the Nigerian people and a desire to see their government do well by them. It is, however, the letter of the resolution, its fundamental basis and the pillars upon which it is based, that I and those with a factual understanding of Nigeria's challenges take issue with. So the resolution makes 5 broad thematic assumptions. Number 1, it presumes that Christians in Nigeria do not have freedom to worship and that they have been the major victims of Nigeria's security crisis. Second, it assumes that the Nigerian state, and this is the wording of the resolution, assumes that the Nigerian state is actively partisan in its support of Fulani militants and promotes the interest of this ethnic Fulani militia in creating a modern caliphate. Third, it views Nigeria's many crises mainly through the lens of sectarian violence that is perpetuated with the aim of supporting the Islamization of Nigeria, and it disagrees with the framing of the conflicts between herders and farmers as resource-based disputes, and suggests that there is a systematic targeting of Christian communities in these conflicts. Fourth, it presumes that the presence of Sharia law in 12 northern states implies that Christians, other non-Muslims, and even Muslims who live in such jurisdictions are forcibly subject to Islamic law. And fifth, it suggests that prominent Christian and Muslim leaders who advocate for religious tolerance are more likely to be kidnapped or assassinated. The truth, I dare say, is a lot more complicated, and I'll try to address these broad themes in turn. So firstly, with regards to the presumption that Christians have borne the brunt of sufferings in Nigeria, I think it is unusual to have to compare which religious group has suffered more in the various crises that continue to assail Nigeria. However, if by the word suffering, we are referring to the sheer numbers of people killed and displaced from their homes, then certainly Muslims have suffered as much as Christians have in Nigeria. Some might even argue that they've suffered more in the last decade. We must remember that Nigeria's most extended conflict, the Boko Haram crisis, has been contained in Nigeria's mostly Muslim northeastern region. Every single one of the 11 states with the largest numbers of displaced persons, internally displaced persons in Nigeria, are in the north. And while people are more familiar with the Boko Haram crisis in the northeast, or the farmer-herder conflicts in the north central, the southeast, and the southwestern states, or the widespread cases of banditry and kidnapping across Nigeria, the reality is that one of the most crisis-ravaged places in Nigeria is in the northwestern state of Zamfara, where over the last decade, a low-grade ethnic war has been waged since 2011 between the ethnic Fulani and their Hausa neighbors. The victims of this war are mostly Muslims. However, that conflict hardly ever makes it to the news because it does not fit the narrative that Nigeria's crises are rooted in sectarian violence intended to suppress Christians. Secondly, with regards to the presumption that the Nigerian state is actively partisan in its support of Fulani militants and promotes the interest of this ethnic Fulani militia in creating a modern caliphate, we state as follows. And again, I'm speaking to the wording of the resolution. So this is a direct lift from the resolution. Now, my submission is that while it is true that the Nigerian president and vice president are both Muslims, they are not Fulani. The president is a Southwestern Muslim, while his wife is not just a Christian. She is also an ordained minister of the Redeemed Christian Church of God, the largest evangelical denomination in Nigeria. The vice president of Nigeria is an ethnic Kanuri from the Nigerian Northeast, a member of a tribe who pride themselves in having established an empire, the Kanem-Borno Empire, that predates the Fulani Caliphate. Anybody who knows northern politics understands that the Kanuri and the Fulani are arch political rivals. Now, of the 6 people who currently sit atop Nigeria's military, judicial, and law enforcement system, 4 of them are Christians, and these include the Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Olufemi Oluyede, the Chief of Naval Staff, Vice Admiral Ikechukwu Ogala, and the Inspector General of Police, Mr. Kayode Egbetokun. Only the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Kudirat Kekereekun, and the Chief of Air Staff, Air Marshal Hassan Abubakar, are Muslims. And it must be noted that the Chief Justice is a Southwestern Muslim, while the other Muslim, the Chief of Air Staff, Air Marshal Hassan Abubakar, is of Hausa ethnicity. He is not Fulani. So not one of Nigeria's current security leaders is Fulani. So there's nothing in the structure of the Nigerian political, military, judicial, or law enforcement systems that would suggest that the Nigerian state is rigged to support the ascendancy of an Islamic Fulani caliphate. Thirdly, with regards to the view that Nigeria's many crises should be examined mainly through the lens of sectarian violence that is perpetuated with the aim of supporting the Islamization of Nigeria, here's my position. Apart from the Boko Haram conflict, which is rooted in Islamic extremism, none of Nigeria's other conflicts have a religious basis. And as is the case with other terror groups like Islamic State and Al-Qaeda, to which the 2 factions of Boko Haram now belong, it is fellow Muslims that have borne the brunt of Boko Haram's extremism. While it is true that the Fulani are involved in the conflicts in the Northwest, in the North Central, in the Southwest, and the Southeast, the common thread through all these crises are rooted in conflicts over whether the Fulani can graze their 25 million cattle on shrinking farmlands or whether they can access scarce water resources. My organization, again, undertook extensive studies of this issue in 2016, and our conclusions have not changed since then, that the Ferma-Hada crisis is not a sectarian or ethnic conflict. It is a resource conflict rooted in Nigeria's changing demographics and the ravages of climate change. The only regions where a major Fulani crisis does not exist is in the Northeast, where their cattle are rustled by Boko Haram, and so the Fulani avoid those areas. And the Fulani also avoid the South-South region because of the presence of a debilitating cattle disease called trypanosomiasis, or what many of us would call sleeping sickness. And only one of the 4 regions with Fulani-related conflicts is the majority Christian region, and this is the Southeast. I invite those of you on this call to imagine a world where America's 90 million cattle roam freely across America. Imagine the conflicts that will result as cattle trespass on people's property, trample on people's gardens, consume the crops that are being grown on farmlands in Ohio, in Iowa, in Illinois, in Oregon, and defecate in the pools and lakes that communities source their drinking water. Well, we recall a time like this in America. That era is captured in movies. It was called the period of the Wild West, where the rancher with the fastest gunman was the one whose animals had access to the best grazing lands. It was the era of cowboys like Jesse James, like Tom Horn, an era of widespread lawlessness, extrajudicial killings, and carnage. That is what Nigeria is going through. Nigeria has no commercial ranches. Climate change has led to droughts that have constrained water resources. In the last 60 years, Nigeria's population has gone from 50 million people to 220 million people, a fourfold increase. What used to be fallow land has now been occupied by people and businesses. Yet, we expect the Fulani to continue using the same grazing routes that have been in use for over 100 years, when Nigeria's population was just a tenth of what it is now. Our recommendation then was that the Fulani had to be supported in migrating their operations from a roaming pastoral nomadic nature to a settled ranching-based model. Nigeria's governments have consistently failed to address the root causes of this issue. Thankfully, just last year, the current Nigerian government established the Ministry of Livestock that is intended to support the emergence of the necessary policy framework and infrastructure to enable cattle ranching. We hope they will be successful. Fourth, with respect to the presumption that the presence of Sharia law in 12 northern states implies that Christians, other non-Muslims, and even Muslim law are our position. The 12 northern states with Sharia law adopted that legal system using due process and in accordance with the constitutional federal structure of the Nigerian state. A common misconception is that all Nigerians in Sharia states are subject to Sharia law. That is not the case. I lived in and I was born in a state that is now a Sharia state. I'm a Christian, and that's Kaduna State. Sharia law does not apply to non-Muslims. And in fact, Muslims have the right to request to be tried under secular law in Sharia states. Furthermore, Muslims tried under Sharia law also have the right of appeal to secular courts. The resolution also called out blasphemy laws, and we're encouraged by the fact that these blasphemy laws have been successfully fought in the courts. It might be interesting to note that majority of Nigeria's southern Christian people who live outside of their regions of origin actually reside in mostly northern Sharia states like Kano, Kaduna, Niger, and Sokoto. Fifth, with regards to the presumption that prominent Christian and Muslim leaders who advocate for religious tolerance have been preferentially targeted for kidnap or assassination, our view is that prominent faith leaders who have been victims of kidnapping have mostly been targets of opportunity. Kidnapping is still all too rampant, and no target is guaranteed to bring more funds in a timely manner than faith leaders. While only friends and family members rally around to pay ransom demands from kidnappers, faith leaders' ransom demands are contributed to by their followers. And this offers perverse incentives to kidnappers. So, in conclusion, there are 4 reasons why we believe Nigeria does not deserve CPC designation. 1, the case for sub-designation is based on a set of premises that we do not believe fully factors in the nuanced nature and complexities of the Nigerian situation. Secondly, it does not factor in or acknowledge the efforts being made by the current government to address the issues of insecurity and to provide a balanced leadership of the Nigerian security system. Third, and this case has already been made, CPC designation can result in trade restrictions that can have an impact on the Nigerian people at a time when we're seeking ways to deepen trade relations between Nigeria and the United States. Finally, it places Nigeria on a list of rogue nations that it does not share any affinity with. For all the issues and problems Nigeria has, I do not believe Nigeria belongs on the list that includes Burma, China, Iran, and North Korea. Now, even though my organization does not believe that we deserve CPC designation, The reality is a lot more needs to be done. So there are 4 clear things that we believe we can work with our friends in the Congress and our friends across the US. Firstly, we have to address corruption by Nigerian officials with security-related designations. We can use targeted actions. And those targeted actions can include, for example, measures that will track corrupt proceeds from any Nigerian official with direct or indirect responsibility for Nigeria's security situation. We believe those actions should include things like seizure of assets. It should include visa cancellations or denials. It should include travel restrictions, asset forfeitures, and other legal tools that are currently applied to terror funds that can be used to ensure that we see good behavior. Secondly, we need to put pressure on the Nigerian government to ensure that there's a return of IDPs to their homes. Nigeria has over 5 million internally displaced persons who are refugees in their own country. And so we strongly support efforts that are intended to ensure that these people can return home. And there is no urgency that has been shown by the Nigerian government to get these people back home. So what are some of the things that we think can potentially be done? Well, we can place travel restrictions on the chief security officers from those states that have IDPs that have not been able to return home. Thirdly, we believe we have to support legal aid and representation to Nigerians appealing Sharia and blasphemy rulings. In theory, yes, you have the ability to go to court, but the reality is it is also expensive to do that. So ways in which we can support all of those efforts are important. Finally, we support calls by Nigerian groups for restricting the use of cybersecurity laws for persecuting citizens that are critical of the security failings of government officials. We believe that all of these different actions, in coordination with our friends in the Congress and across the US government, are targeted ways in which we can achieve what we're looking for. And what we need here, we believe, is the scalpel of targeted actions rather than the armor of CPC designation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. Thank you all for your patience. At this moment, please, if you have questions, kindly raise your hands using the feature in the React section, middle of your screen. Also, you can chat your questions in the chat box and I will read out your questions. The very first question I want to have is Attorney Emmanuel, and regards to your advocacy for the designation, in your work with the United States government, are there also consideration for a TPS designation if the conditions that warrant a CPS designation parallels that of TPS?
7.8 miles. Take exit be on the right onto State Bridge 27 East towards Penn. Hello? Okay.
Why is that not being considered? Did you hear the question, sir, or do you want me to repeat it?
Yes, I heard you quite all right. And that's a good question. In fact, let me say this. One of the policy inconsistencies we had under the first Trump administration was that, on the one hand, he publicly rebuked General Buhari for the killings of Christians. And then on the other hand, he went ahead to ban Nigerians on the Muslim ban list. And we thought that those two policies were inconsistent. The normal policy response to people who are persecuted or endangered is to provide them asylum or refugee resettlement or TPS, as the case may be. A case in point, of course, is his alleged persecution of white South Africans, which prompted him, within his first month in office, to offer asylum to Afrikaners. That is the sort of thing he should have done with regard to the perceived persecution of Nigerians during his administration the first time, instead of expelling Nigerians or banning them from migrating to the US. Now, having said that, how does that TPS advocacy play right now? As someone who has worked on US-Nigeria policy for the past quarter century. I'm actually glad that TPS did not pass under the last administration because it would simply have become a target for reversal by this administration, kind of in the ping pong scenario that they had when Trump banned Nigerians and Biden came in and unbanned them. I think that we actually have the opportunity for policy constituency by confluence of both policies. If the Trump administration believes that Nigerians are being persecuted, then the next logical step would be to support a TPS for Nigerians. So the direct outcrop of this policy in a way that impacts our community is the TPS policy. Now, let me just point out that data that just emerged yesterday showed that 1 out of 12 Christians in the US are at risk of deportation right now under the current administration's policies. And so, of course, our community will be vulnerable in that regard. But if this designation goes through, then of course we have a policy backing to ensure that we're not removed and that our people continue to gain asylum with this system, within this system. The last point I'll make quickly here is that I'm glad that I gave practical real life experiences of what governments are doing in Nigeria, what people are going through in Nigeria. And I don't think that, the opinions expressed by Dr. Fabiyi are in tandem with what the generality of Nigerian people feel right now. I was in Nigeria twice last month, and people are very upset at the way they are being killed and massacred with impunity in Nigeria. And no country, no decent country on earth should allow that to happen to its citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Malcolm, this question is for you. The most Christian in the world killed in 2024 was in Nigeria. How does this square with your views to downplay this angle, given the fact that Nigeria is rated as the country that has the most killing of Christians, and also respond to Attorney Emmanuel's rebuttal of your presentation?
The reality is far too many people are being killed in Nigeria, Christian or Muslim. That's not the question. When we talk about this particular CPC designation, part of what that designation presumes is that there is a government-aided, government-enabled targeting of Christians. That is just not true. Now, having said that, though, yes, there far too many people are dying in the country. Far too many people are being killed. Whether they're Christians, whether they're Muslims, whether they're animists, whether they're worshippers of traditional religions, far too many Nigerians are being killed. But the presumption again here that there's a targeting of Christians and that the resources of the federal government are being used to aid that targeting is something that is not borne out by the reality on the ground. I don't know what numbers are being referred to here, but I can tell you that every single Nigerian understands and knows that there's just far too much killing taking place. If you're not killed on the farms because there are farmer-herder conflicts, you're likely going to be kidnapped on the roads by kidnappers. Kidnappers are not asking you whether you're a Christian or a Muslim before they kidnap you. They pick up everybody that they find. So this idea that there's some sectarian targeting of Nigerians is what, again, the data does not support. And part of the issue that we have in the country is that it is often very easy for us to misinterpret ethnic issues as if they were sectarian issues. They're not always the case, right? Not every ethnic issue is a sectarian issue. And I give examples. If you go to Zamfara, what's going on in Zamfara is an ethnic issue. It is a similar ethnic issue to what is happening in the Middle Belt. What's going on in the Middle Belt? Fulani herders and their cattle are coming in contact with local farmers. The result of that is conflict. That conflict leads to death. What is happening in Zamfara is the exact same issue. Hausa farmers are in conflict with Fulani herders in Zamfara. Zamfara is in the northeast. So these are two different places. You see what is happening in Zamfara, the exact same issue as what is happening in the north, in the middle belt. We call it sectarian in the middle belt, and we call it an ethnic issue when it is happening in the northeast. So we need to have a consistent lens by which we're looking at these issues. Resource-based issues are resource-based issues. There's no sectarian issue there. So that, quite frankly, is my submission in that case. Again, the point I'm making is not that more Christians are being killed or more. No, nobody's minimizing any issue. Too much killing is taking place in the country. But the CPC resolution, the bill as it stands, again, is based on a number of presumptions that are just not supported by the facts.
Thank you, sir. I want to also highlight a point here. I agree with Prince Nkuku and the last speaker. Nigeria will be in a worse position designated as CPC. The presumptions are misplaced on this proposed bill. I want to say, if you have questions, if you want to unmute yourself, please use the hands, raise your hands option. It might be a little bit easier than reading the text of your question. So you can please indicate if you want to come to the mic to ask your questions. That will be helpful. Yes, Beatrice.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here located in Atlanta, Beatrice Ayorinde. My question to you is, what are we doing with regards to the security and safety in Nigeria? What are we doing about the problem of kidnapping and corruption? Because there are many times that foreign countries want to invest in our country, but because we do not have those type of stability, they do not wish to invest in our country. So we have to make people to be accountable. So my question to you, what are we doing about this? There should be accountability. We shouldn't make this a norm for people to kidnap and ask for money, and they give them money, and then, no, there shouldn't be. There should be accountability. That's my question. I want someone to help me figure that out, because every day I see that, I just shake my head at human being, like the gentleman said, human being doesn't, they don't even respect human lives over there.
If it's okay, I want to direct that question to Mrs. Ndidi. From an economic standpoint, just the connection between insecurity and prospects of financial investments in Nigeria.
I think you've answered the question from that lens. But I think there are three things I would say. I would say, Madam, you're right. I think there's a very important role for civil society. And I'm glad to hear my brothers here speaking so passionately. We do need the same civil society organizations that held governments accountable during the military era and the pro-democracy movement to arise again and actually hold governments accountable, because security and stability are key. And you know, a few years ago, with one of my companies in Nigeria, Sahel Consulting, which works in agriculture and nutrition, we have an annual summit on, and one year we actually focused on security. And what we realized was that the security agencies are not well integrated with the farmer networks, which are not well integrated with the ICT networks, which are not well integrated with, you know, the infrastructure teams on the ground. And we just found that, you know, during elections, it's amazing. We can mobilize farmers, you get robot calls, you get all of that. But in between election seasons, we're not maximizing what infrastructure can do and technology and data can do to help citizens protect themselves. And where you have, you know, security insights and information. And most companies now have security companies on retainer. And because Sahel has team members all over the country, literally we get daily reports, weekly reports, and we have, you know, security assessments of regions and villages before we go in to do our work. And not everybody can afford it. It's expensive. So what I would say is that we need to really hold governments accountable for their role. And this, you know, lots we can do to protect citizens and inform citizens and prepare citizens. The second is what you were just saying around the link between economics and jobs and growth. We've seen so many young people, our young men in particular, being victims of unemployment and being recruited to engage in very bad activities. And unfortunately, unless we can give them hope and a job, we can't dissuade them from getting involved in these activities. And so for me, I think that's where economic growth, catalytic financing, and the work one does is very important, really fighting for investments for Africa and funding that is appropriate. And we've taken on the Cost of Capital Commission this year because South Africa is hosting the G20 for the first time and really looking at how can we reduce the cost of financing for Africa. Africans pay 500% more than other world regions linked to this risk premium. Of course, there is risk around investing in many of our countries, but there are ways to hedge risks. And other regions are not held to the same standards. And so financing is too expensive, and we need financing for growth to get that from our micro businesses to our small and medium and large. So for me, there's a big piece of the advocacy agenda that has to do with driving growth and ensuring that it's inclusive growth and equitable growth and that nobody's left behind. And so I'm involved in quite a few initiatives on this, and I would love to stay connected to many of you. And then I wanted to address the comments in the chat about the importance of having an ambassador. I will tell you that in most rooms that I walk into in Washington, D.C., that where Africa is being discussed, I'm still the only African. And this is in London, this is in Paris, this is in Brussels, and Africa is being discussed. Now, most rooms where the highest level discussions are being had, the one, for example, on ending energy poverty with Rockefeller Foundation, where I serve on the board, Bezos Earth Fund hosted it with the World Bank, there was no Nigerian representative because only ambassadors were invited. And if you do not have an ambassador invited, they're not going to take a deputy. They're not going to take a consular officer. So we miss out on these opportunities. It's the same with the Aspen Security Forum. Aspen Security Forum has the biggest defense contractors, the biggest security agencies. And yet again, there was no Nigerian ambassador because only ambassadors were invited, only CEOs were invited. So representation matters at the highest levels. And unfortunately, we cannot compare ourselves to other regions. I can tell you who the most prominent African ambassadors are in Washington, D.C. today and what they've been able to galvanize for their countries. And Elsa Kenze of Tanzania. And that's why Tanzania hosted the GAP conference and the energy conference, where all these countries signed compacts between the African Development Bank, the World Bank, the Rockefeller Foundation. And yes, we do have energy poverty and it's linked to insecurity. If you don't have electricity, if you don't have energy to power your businesses, it not only increases insecurity, it also makes it harder for us to create jobs and inclusive growth. So I am a big proponent that there are some things that I would love to suggest that we do. And obviously, self-preservation and us not being targeted for doing some of these things is really important. So I say all this in my own personal capacity as a Nigerian who cares deeply about our and our country and the continent more broadly. But we're almost invisible on most forums that I've sit on in G7 countries, and it's not acceptable at this stage.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jenga, if I may just very quickly add to that. So one thing that I think would be essential to improve security, and we're starting to see that happen, is for security to be decentralized. So the southwestern states, for example, over the last 4 or 5 years, have established a force they call Amotekun. Every single state in the southwest has that force. And what those localized forces do is that they view security from a lens that is based on ensuring the maximum outcomes for the local community they come from. The Nigerian army is unable to do it. They've demonstrated a complete incapacity. It depends on the composition, the ethnic composition of the people that you send in an army battalion that's coming from maybe Kano to go quell unrest in Benue. So the decentralization of security, more states need to do what the southwestern states are doing. 3-4 years ago, you couldn't travel many of the southwestern states. Today, you can. It's not that kidnapping has disappeared, but it's been significantly reduced. So that decentralization of security has to happen more. Most Nigerian governments at the center have been very reluctant to decentralize security for obvious reasons. They want control in the center. The more you decentralize security, the more possible the reality is that some of these regions might get to a place where they may be able to defend themselves. I guess that has always been the concern. But decentralization, and then in my opinion, the bigger issue is corruption. Billions and billions are allocated for all the security issues. There's nothing easier to embezzle than security funds. Nobody counts the number of bullets you claim to use in fighting Boko Haram. Nobody, if you tell them you bought, armored vehicles and they were all destroyed during a security upheaval, nobody's going to go there and be counting the number of grenades that were used. And it's a joke. In Nigeria, security funds that are given to states, most state governors treat it as a private petty cash fund. So how do we make sure? And quite frankly, we can talk all the theory we want to speak here today. The reality of the matter is there's nothing the citizens say that is going to influence how these officials behave. And so if there's a way in which we can leverage the support that we have here, the advocacy of people like Attorney Ogebe and the friends that we have in the Congress and the US government, it is in finding targeted ways of ensuring that those who have responsibility for our security in Nigeria do not have any safe havens for taking these funds and spending them. Where do they take the money to? They bring the money here, they buy homes here, they send their kids to school here. We need to find ways to target those funds and to make sure that the proceeds that come from denying Nigerians of their rights to security, that there's no safe haven for those funds anywhere in the world. And again, our task, I think, is to find targeted ways of working with our friends here to ensure that we can identify innovative ways of making that happen.
Oh, thank you very much, sir. Just before I bring Madam Pat, she is a co-lead of the TPS campaign. I've had the great honor of working with on the TPS campaign, and she's one of the major advocates for Nigeria outside of Nigeria in the immigration justice space. Madam Pat, over to you, ma'am.
Yeah, my question is way off of where all of you are traveling. I'm concerned about the asylum seekers. I work with at least a couple hundred on the Nigerian forum. I work with a lot of people who are deported, and I don't really know how many have come in on my address. But if this is passed, it would seem like it would help their cases because they're not winning their cases. Because the question in asylum is your government should protect you, and they need to prove that the government has refused to protect them. And so I guess I would be for this if we could get number one, TPS, and number two, if it would help with country conditions so that people can get asylum here and can get safety here, because by and large Nigerians are not they're being deported pretty rapidly, and then they get back there and they're not safe and they have no money and they can't pay for anything, or their families are hungry and they have to escape to yet another country. So I don't think that diaspora who are sitting there nice and safe in the United States or wherever, I think they have to consider the people that are still on the run. There's a lot of them. And yeah, Nigeria is a huge group of people.
I want to throw that question open to the whole panel. If anyone wants to respond to Madam Pat's question.
Well, so if I may, some years ago, I met a human rights committee of the European Union in Nigeria, and they came to Nigeria to investigate the root causes of the mass migration across the Atlantic that is claiming, countless lives. I don't know if you know this, but on one occasion, we lost 23 young Nigerian girls in Rome, in Italy. And there is a shrine, for them in a community in Rome. And I say to myself, how many Nigerians go on pilgrimage to Rome and all of that and never care a thought, never have a thought to go to this shrine for these young girls who died trying to get to Europe. But when we met with that delegation, I told them, I said, listen, right now you're suffering the impacts of mass migration from the south, because this is where, the migrants are coming from. The displaced folks in the north are ending up in refugee camps in Cameroon, in Niger, in Chad. The day that Nigeria implodes, the influx from Nigeria into the sub-region and across into the West will be tragic. There are countries in West Africa now whose demography has been changed since the Biafra War. The Biafrans who went there, settled in those communities, never came back to Nigeria. And so we can imagine what the impact will be if anything happens to Nigeria. That said, I support well-managed resettlement and TPS within the United States. There's no doubt that the conditions in Nigeria are atrocious and that other countries should prepare to receive Nigerians in a managed way. And I think that, this CPC designation helps to make that achievable. I gave the illustration of the young lady who, after the BBOG and Boko Haram FTO designation, won her asylum case very quickly. So I think this will help. That's my 2 cents.
Well, thank you very much. We have tried to provide arguments for this designation in opposition and in support for the designation. We are a 501c3, non-religious, non-political, non-partisan organization, and we have dedicated our own responsibility to advocating and to educating our community for civic participation and engagement. So we will be providing the scripts and the resources for you to make your informed decision, whether as a private citizen, a concerned Nigerian, friends of Nigeria, want to engage your congressional rep to support this designation or to oppose this designation. That said, for those who join us a little bit later, I just want to quickly talk about some upcoming opportunities at the Nigerian Center as we close out for you to be aware of. If you have not yet filed your taxes and you want assistance with that, the deadline for filing taxes is April 15. Please reach out to the Nigeria with the caveat that you make below 67,000. It's a program for low to medium income earners. We can do it in person or we can do it virtual. If you are in the Washington, D.C. area, we are working with Council Member Wala Bligay out of Tax Day. The information is on our social media and website. You can also come to our centers as well. On April 30th, we are hosting an asylum Know Your Right workshop. There's a significant number of our community who have pending asylum cases, and with the political climate, very nervous about their application. And there are some who come from actually this part of the country that is actually going through displacement and armed conflict, who are very cautious of submitting asylum application. So what is asylum? What is credible fear and domestic violence as a pathway for residency? That workshop, Know Your Rights, will be on that. And if you notice, what we've been doing with our Know Your Rights lately is we make it a little bit more multi-dimensional. So there's the legal perspective and there is the 8 governmental agencies. We have judges, law enforcement, the DA's office, congressional rep, council members. So we are exploring multiple avenues to get resources to the community. We just announced a partnership with a wonderful nonprofit called Upwardly Global, who is supporting international professionals, immigrants, to be able to transfer their overseas work experience to the United States so they don't have to start all over again. You will be assigned a professional coach, certification support, all for free, and training, job readiness resources, and workforce development opportunities as an agreement at no cost to you. And we are holding an information session Connected to this info session is the immigration pathway of employment-based immigration, the national interest waiver, and how you can self-petition yourself as a skilled worker, which a lot of folks come from our community with such background, and it's a very significant pathways that we haven't explored as much. So May 28th, if you go to the website, you can register for that. If you know anyone who needs to speak to an immigration attorney, we offer free walk-in immigration screening, representation, partial representation, consultation at the Nigerian Center. That is what our entrance look like at no cost. And it is, you're free to come in. If you're not able to, there is a small fee. You can also use the same service. And that is not limited to Thursdays. It's open all through the week. You just have to submit an online intake form, and you'll be assigned a lawyer to help you with that. NAPAC, which is the Nigerian American Public Affairs Committee, NALA, Nigerian American Lawyers Association, and the Nigerian Center will be announcing our Immigration Defense Fund for anyone going through deportation, removal proceedings, and would need representation for deportation defense and have limited access or zero access to representation. We are announcing the funds that members of our community are contributing to be able to pay for such legal services. And that will be coming very shortly. You can get involved through volunteer opportunities, community partners, whether you are faith-based, business, media, nonprofit organization, be a part of our community partners. If you're not following us on social media, please do so. We truly need your financial support to continue this life-changing work that we do at the Nigerian Center. That said, thank you so much for dedicating your weekend. Shows your love and your faith for Nigeria, for joining this presentation today. Thank you very much. And I'd like to say at this point, we are all released into greatness. Bye for now.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you very much. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Awesome presentation. Thank you for inviting me, DK.
Thank you, Benga. Thank you, Prince Nkuku. That's a phenomenal job, and Jide. Thanks a lot. This is Dr. V.
Yeah, it's not